My name is Samantha Saldana, and today we'll be talking about Parkinson's disease. We're going to be talking about causes, symptoms, and treatments of the disease. First off, what is Parkinson's disease? Parkinson's disease is a progressive disease of the nervous system, which means that it affects movement, and this is usually manifested in tremors, usually of the hand, but can also be of the jaw and legs. There is also stiffness of the trunk and limbs, and typically in early stages you will see slowed or slurred speech in people that will acquire Parkinson's. Right now there is no cure for the disease, however there are management of symptoms which can be done through medications and or surgery. So what are the stages of the disease? So we have 5 different stages, stage 1 being the mildest. And in this stage, there are tremors and symptoms that are restricted to one side of the body. In stage 2, you're going to have stiffness, tremors are more noticeable, and facial expressions may also be affected. Symptoms are usually apparent on both sides of the body at this stage. Next off, we have stage 3, which is the mid stage, and there is a loss of balance and decreased flexes are added to the symptoms. Usually this is treated with occupational therapy and medication. Stage 4 is a more progressive stage. The patient has great trouble moving and they need assistance moving but can stand alone. Stage 5 is more advanced and there are usually stiffness of the legs, which causes freezing when standing. And the patients cannot stand without falling, and they may have hallucinations and delusions at this stage. So what are the causes of the disease? Well, there is a progressive deterioration of the neurons in the synapse ganglia. Normally, these neurons produce dopamine, and the less dopamine that the person has, the less ability they have to regulate movements, their body, and their emotions. So why is dopamine important? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it allows for communication between the synapse ganglia and the corpus luteum, which is shown here in this picture. The synapse ganglia projects anteriorly to the luteum of the brain. So here we have a picture that shows normal dopamine activity in a normal person, and this allows for normal movement because they have a great amount of dopamine. And in a Parkinson's patient, dopamine is much less, more rare to come by, and they have movement disorders at this point. So here we have a PET scan of a normal person and a Parkinson's patient. And the PET scan highlights the loss of dopamine capacity in Parkinson's patients, and the red and yellow areas show dopamine concentration in the midbrain. So there is a marked dopamine deficiency in Parkinson's patients, which cause many of the symptoms that we see in Parkinson's patients. So why do some people acquire the disease? Well, the exact cause is unknown, but many factors contribute. First off, there's your genes. So specific gene mutations can cause Parkinson's disease, mostly in cases with many family members affected by the disease. There are also environmental triggers like toxins. There can be external or internal toxins that can destroy dopaminergic neurons. And these include magnesium, carbon monoxide, carbon disulfide, and other pesticides. So you can see how certain jobs, those workers will be more likely or less likely to acquire Parkinson's later on in life. There is also oxidative stress that contributes to Parkinson's disease. So this is a picture that shows the synapse ganglia, which is where which is the main brain area that we see is deficient in Parkinson's patients, and this is what a neuron typically looks like. So next we're going to talk about motor symptoms of Parkinson's patients. These can be slowness of movement and involuntary shaking or tremor at rest, usually in the hands but also in the jaw and legs of the patient. There can also be stiffness of the muscles of the arms, legs, or trunk. There is usually also trouble with balance. This is also called posterior instability. So in this picture, we have many of the symptoms shown in a Parkinson's patient, including trembling of the extremities, flexed elbows and wrists, rigidity of the trunk, stooped posture, reduced arm swinging because they have problems with stiffness, and there's usually slightly flexed hips and knees as well. So in addition to motor symptoms, there can also be secondary motor symptoms. So freezing causes fear to put the foot forward in Parkinson's patients. This also comes from stiffness of the legs. There is also micrographia, which results from the shrinking handwriting of Parkinson's patients. Next off, we're going to talk about non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's patients. So they can have mood disorders, cognitive changes, difficulty with attention, planning, language, and memory, hallucinations and delusions, sleep disorders, constipation and early satiety, vision problems, excessive sweating, loss of sense of smell, and sexual problems. So next off, we're going to talk about treatments of the disease. First off, you can treat it with medication, and this usually helps with symptoms, including walking, movement, and tremor symptoms. And medications can increase or substitute for dopamine. However, dopamine cannot be given directly because it can't enter the brain. And this is a list of typical medications you would see for a Parkinson's patient. However, there are many more. Another route could be surgery, and this is usually only considered when medication is not adequate to control symptoms. And there are two types of surgery: paligodectomy, which destroys the overactive globus pallidus, a part of the brain that is overactive in people with Parkinson's, and taligodectomy, which destroys part of the thalamus to block the abnormal brain activity from reaching the muscles and causing tremors. However, this route only affects tremors of the patients. And this picture shows the globus pallidus and the thalamus of the brain. And these are my citations. Thank you for listening to my lecture.